In the parched wilderness of the American Southwest, where the relentless sun beats down on cracked earth and sparse vegetation, a small movement caught the attention of wildlife researcher Sam Morgan. It was barely perceptible at first, just a slight disturbance in the dusty soil near a dried creek bed. Sam had been tracking a family of black bears for months, documenting their struggle to survive in this increasingly arid landscape. But something was wrong today. The air felt heavy with an unseen tragedy. As Sam cautiously approached the movement, his trained eyes spotted a small dark shape curled beneath the meager shade of a stunted juniper. A bear cub, no more than 4 months old, lay trembling in the harsh light. Its normally glossy black coat appeared dull and patchy. More alarming was the complete absence of the mother bear. In all his years studying these magnificent creatures, Sam had never seen a mother willingly abandon her cub in this season unless something was terribly wrong. The cub's breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. Its small body convulsed with each intake of air, too weak to even respond to Sam's careful approach. As he edged closer, the true horror of the situation began to reveal itself. The cub's fur wasn't just dull, it was moving, crawling, teeming with life that didn't belong there. Through his binoculars, Sam could see the cub's skin rippling with hundreds, perhaps thousands, of tiny parasites. They swarmed across its body like a living blanket, each one latched firmly to the young bear, drawing out its lifeblood drop by precious drop. The cub's eyes, partially open, showed only the whites, rolled back in agony or approaching death. Sam couldn't tell which. With a sickening realization, Sam understood why this cub had been left behind. These weren't ordinary parasites. This was a mass execution happening in slow motion, each tiny creature an executioner carrying out a death sentence on the helpless young bear. The mother had made the most heartbreaking choice possible in the brutal economics of wilderness survival, abandoning one to save others. Sam reached for his satellite phone with shaking hands. If there was even the slightest chance to save this cub from its executioners, he had to try. The race against death had begun, with the cub's faint heartbeat counting down the remaining moments of its young life. Sam knelt beside the suffering cub, his heart pounding with a mixture of dread and scientific curiosity. The gentle breeze carried the unmistakable sour scent of illness. With gloved hands, Sam carefully parted the cub's patchy fur for a closer look. What he discovered made his stomach turn. Hundreds upon hundreds of swollen ticks clung to the bear's skin, their bloated bodies ranging from the size of apple seeds to that of small grapes. They clustered in grotesque colonies around the cub's ears, neck, and underbelly. Anywhere the skin was thin and blood vessels ran close to the surface. This was no ordinary parasite load. This was a mass invasion, a coordinated attack by nature's most patient predators. The ticks had transformed from mere parasites into executioners, carrying out a slow, methodical death sentence on the helpless young bear. Each one had inserted its barbed feeding tube deep into the cub's skin, secreting anticoagulants to keep the blood flowing freely while they gorged themselves. Their bodies swelled with the cub's precious lifeblood, turning from flat, brown specks into bulbous, grayish-purple sacs. Through his years of wildlife research, Sam knew that ticks were a normal part of a bear's life. The thick fur and hardy constitution of adult bears usually prevented infestations from reaching dangerous levels. But this young cub, perhaps already weakened by the harsh drought conditions, had succumbed to a perfect storm of circumstances. The dry season had concentrated wildlife around the few remaining water sources, creating ideal conditions for tick populations to explode. The cub, with its still developing immune system, had become the perfect host for this army of executioners. As Sam examined the bear more closely, he could see the devastating effects of the infestation. The cub's gums were nearly white, a sign of severe anemia from blood loss. Its skin hung loosely, indicating dehydration and malnutrition. The parasites weren't just feeding, they were draining the very essence of life from the young bear. Each tick was taking only a small amount, but multiplied by thousands, the blood loss had become catastrophic. Adding to this direct damage, Sam knew the ticks were likely transmitting multiple diseases, overwhelming the cub's immune system and shutting down its organs one by one. The executioners were thorough in their work, attacking the bear systematically from within and without. Without immediate intervention, the verdict was clear. These executioners would complete their sentence within hours, perhaps minutes. The mother bear, faced with this grim reality, had made the brutal but necessary choice to abandon her doomed offspring rather than watch its suffering continue or risk the infestation spreading to herself or other cubs. Just 2 days earlier, the mother bear had faced the most heart-wrenching decision of her existence. Her maternal instincts, honed through millions of years of evolution, had been at war with the brutal reality of wilderness survival. Sam, having tracked this bear family for months, had witnessed the beginning of this tragedy unfold through his camera lens. The mother bear had first noticed her cubs' deteriorating condition as they foraged for scarce food in the drought-stricken landscape. While her other two cubs romped energetically despite the harsh conditions, this smallest cub had grown increasingly lethargic. At first, she had tried to care for it, meticulously grooming the little one with her tongue, attempting to remove some of the parasites. But the infestation had progressed too far, the executioners too numerous to defeat. As the weakened cub struggled to keep pace with the family, the mother bear's behavior had shifted. Sam had observed her sniffing the sick cub thoroughly, processing information humans could never perceive. The smell of disease, the scent of approaching death. There was wisdom in her ancient genes, a harsh but necessary calculus of survival that humans, with their medicines and shelters, had long forgotten. The mother bear had made her decision during the night. With food and water scarce and two other cubs depending on her, she could not risk their survival for one already marked by death. She could not allow the executioners to transfer to her healthy cubs, turning one tragedy into three. When she moved on at dawn, she did not look back at the small form she left beneath the juniper tree. Nature shows no sentimentality, yet Sam had wondered if he had seen hesitation in the mother's gait as she led her remaining cubs away. Was there something like sorrow in her eyes, or was that just his human emotions projecting onto her animal instincts? The truth lay somewhere beyond human understanding, in the complex consciousness of a creature both similar to and utterly different from mankind. Left alone, the infested cub had no chance of survival. Too young to fend for itself, even in good health, weakened by the relentless draining of its lifeblood by thousands of parasites, it had curled into itself as the harsh sun climbed higher. No mother's warmth to comfort it, no mother's milk to strengthen it. Just the slow, methodical work of the executioners. Drop by precious drop. In the unforgiving arithmetic of nature, one death was preferable to many. The mother bear had chosen to abandon one to save two, a choice without malice, without cruelty, but devastating in its finality. A choice that had left this small bear utterly alone in its suffering, waiting for an end that seemed certain to come. Hours passed beneath the unforgiving southwestern sun. The abandoned cub's condition deteriorated rapidly as the executioners continued their relentless work. Its breathing grew more labored, coming in shallow, irregular gasps. The small chest barely rose with each intake of air. Occasionally, a weak moan escaped from its throat, a sound so pitiful it seemed to hang in the still desert air. The cub no longer had the strength to move. Its once bright eyes had grown dull and unfocused, staring at nothing. The tiny body, which should have been plump with the growth of youth, had become gaunt as the parasites drained not just blood, but the very will to live. Dehydration had set in, worsening the effects of blood loss. The cub's tongue, dry and swollen, protruded slightly from its mouth. Without water, without mother's milk, without strength to hunt or forage, the end seemed inevitable. Sam had made the emergency call to the regional wildlife rescue team, but he knew they were at least 2 hours away. He watched helplessly as the cub's condition worsened minute by minute. He had encountered many animal tragedies in his years as a wildlife researcher, but something about this small bear's plight struck him profoundly. Perhaps it was the contrast between what should have been a playful cub learning the ways of the wild under its mother's watchful eye, and this grim reality of abandonment and slow execution. He was soon joined by his research partner, Lisa, who had brought emergency supplies from their base camp. Her face fell as she assessed the situation. With 16 years of wildlife veterinary experience, she understood immediately what they were witnessing. The mother had no choice, Lisa whispered, kneeling beside the cub. The infestation is too severe. She abandoned it to save her other cubs. The realization was heartbreaking but undeniable. Nature's harsh logic had played out before them in all its unsentimentality. One life sacrificed for the greater survival of the family line, an ancient calculus written in the genes of all creatures. Yet something in both researchers rebelled against accepting this outcome without a fight. They were scientists, trained to observe without interference, but they were also humans with the unique power to intervene in nature's course. The question hung between them unspoken. Should they let nature take its course, or attempt to save this small life against overwhelming odds? The decision crystallized in an instant when the cub let out another weak moan. Science and objectivity momentarily gave way to compassion. Sam and Lisa exchanged a determined look, silently agreeing that they could not stand by and watch this young life slip away without trying to help. "The rescue team won't make it in time," Lisa said, already pulling medical supplies from her backpack. "If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to save." Their training took over. Lisa administered a small dose of electrolytes using a syringe to combat the cub's severe dehydration, while Sam prepared a makeshift stretcher from his jacket and two hiking poles. Every movement was calculated and careful. Despite the cub's weakened state, they knew that even a dying bear could be dangerous if it felt threatened. The cub barely responded to their ministrations, a worrying sign of how far the executioners had progressed in their grim work. Its eyes remained unfocused, its breathing shallow. Occasionally a small whimper escaped its throat, the only indication that life still clung to the tiny body. The satellite phone crackled with a message from the official rescue team. They were still 90 minutes out but advised on immediate treatment protocols. The most critical instruction was clear. The parasites needed to be removed as quickly as possible, but doing so too rapidly could send the cub into shock. Lisa began the painstaking process of removing the most engorged ticks from around the cub's ears and eyes, carefully extracting each one with tweezers to ensure the feeding parts didn't remain embedded in the skin. Sam monitored the cub's breathing and pulse, ready to signal if its condition suddenly worsened. The sun beat down mercilessly as they worked, sweat dripping from their brows. The minutes stretched into an hour. The pile of extracted parasites grew beside them, a grotesque testament to the battle being waged for the young bear's life. When they had done all they could in the field, the time came to move the cub. With extreme care, they transferred the small body onto the makeshift stretcher. The cub weighed far less than it should have, another sign of its dire condition. Sam lifted the front of the stretcher while Lisa took the back, and they began the arduous journey across the uneven terrain toward the rendezvous point. The trek was punishing. Every jolt might cause the cub additional pain or stress. Every minute spent in transit was a minute delayed in getting the comprehensive care it desperately needed. Yet they persevered, driven by a fierce determination that, having intervened, they would give this abandoned bear the best possible chance at survival. As they crested a rise, they spotted the dust cloud of approaching vehicles. The official rescue team had arrived sooner than expected, their urgency matching the researchers' own. The cub had survived the journey this far, but its battle was far from over. The next few hours would determine whether this small life, abandoned by nature but embraced by human compassion, would survive or succumb to the executioners that had nearly claimed it. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center buzzed with urgent activity as the rescue vehicles pulled into the compound. Dr. Maria Cortez, the head veterinarian, had prepared her team for an emergency, but even her 20 years of experience had not prepared her for what she saw when the small bundle was rushed into the examination room. The bear cub, now eerily still, was brought under the bright medical lights, revealing the true horror of its condition. "My God," Dr. Cortez whispered as she parted the fur to examine the extent of the infestation. "I've never seen anything like this." The parasites covered nearly every inch of the cub's body. What Sam and Lisa had managed to remove in the field represented only a fraction of the total invasion. Under the harsh clinical lights, the team could see that the executioners had established colonies in layers, with smaller ticks nestled between the bloated bodies of their larger companions. The cub's ears, eyelids, and the soft tissue of its groin were particularly heavily infested. Blood tests confirmed what they already suspected: severe anemia, dehydration, and the beginning stages of organ failure. The medical team sprang into action with practiced efficiency. An IV line was carefully inserted to deliver fluids and essential medications. Oxygen was administered through a small mask fitted to the cub's muzzle. Monitors were attached to track its heart rate and oxygen levels. The numbers that flashed on the screens told a grim story. This young life was hanging by the thinnest of threads. The most daunting task lay before them: removing the parasites without sending the cub's already stressed system into complete shutdown. Dr. Cortez organized her team into shifts. The painstaking work of removing the ticks had to be done with surgical precision. Each parasite had to be carefully extracted with specialized tweezers, ensuring that no mouthparts remain embedded in the skin to cause infection. The removed ticks were counted and cataloged, both for scientific documentation and to ensure none were accidentally released into the sanctuary environment. Hour after hour, the team worked under the bright lights. The count of removed parasites climbed steadily: 100, 200, 500. Still they found more, hidden in the folds of skin, burrowed deep into the ear canals, clustered around the base of the tail. Each extraction site was treated with antiseptic, each small wound carefully tended. Throughout the procedure, the cub's vital signs fluctuated dangerously. Twice the heart monitor sounded its alarm as the young bear's pulse weakened to a barely perceptible thread. Each time the team paused in their work to stabilize their patient before continuing the grim harvest of executioners. By midnight, the exhausted medical team had removed over 800 ticks from the small body. Dr. Cortez gently ran her gloved hand over the cub's now patchy fur, feeling for any parasites they might have missed. The bear's skin was hot with fever, its body fighting the toxins released by the dying ticks and the numerous infections they had transmitted. "We've done all we can for now," Dr. Cortez said softly to her team. "The next 24 hours will tell us if it was enough." The cub was moved to intensive care, surrounded by monitoring equipment and warming blankets. An assistant was assigned to sit with it through the night, watching for any change in its condition. The battle against the executioners had been fought with every tool of modern veterinary medicine, but the outcome remained uncertain. The cub's life still balanced on the knife edge between survival and the abyss that had nearly claimed it in the wilderness. Dawn broke over the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center with no certainty that the bear cub would live to see the sunset. The intensive care unit had become the center of a constant, quiet flurry of activity. Staff moved with purpose but spoke in hushed tones, as if the very volume of their voices might disturb the delicate balance keeping the small patient alive. The cub, now named Sierra by the care team, lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Multiple IV lines delivered a carefully calibrated cocktail of medications: antibiotics to fight the infections raging through her tiny body, anti-parasitic drugs to kill any remaining tick larvae, and specially formulated nutrients to begin rebuilding her depleted blood supply. A heating pad maintained her body temperature, which swung erratically between fever and dangerous cold as her system struggled to regulate itself. Dr. Cortez returned at first light, her face showing the strain of too little sleep and too much concern. She reviewed the night's charts with Jessica, the veterinary technician who had maintained the overnight vigil. "Her kidney values are still climbing," Jessica reported, pointing to the latest blood test results. "And there was an episode of seizure activity around 3 a.m. This was the complication they had feared. The toxins released by the ticks, combined with the prolonged blood loss and dehydration, were taking a severe toll on Sierra's organs. What had begun as a battle against external parasites had evolved into a fight against internal shutdown. The executioners, though physically removed, had left poisonous legacies in their wake. Throughout the day, the cub's condition continued to fluctuate. Brief moments of improvement would spark cautious hope among the staff, only to be followed by alarming downturns. During one particularly frightening episode, Sierra's breathing became so labored that Dr. Cortez had to perform an emergency procedure to drain fluid from around her lungs. The emotional toll on the caretakers became increasingly evident as the hours passed. This case had touched something deep in each of them. Perhaps it was the cub's utter helplessness, or the brutality of the infestation that had nearly claimed her life. Whatever the reason, the usual professional distance had eroded. Sierra had become more than just another patient. Sam and Lisa visited in the afternoon, bringing the field notes they had compiled on Sierra's family. The information might prove valuable if the cubs survived long enough for rehabilitation and possible release. Their faces fell as they saw the cubs' condition, so little improved despite the intensive care. "Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing," Sam confessed quietly to Lisa as they watched the medical team adjust another medication. "Maybe nature should have taken its course." Dr. Cortez overheard his comment as she checked Sierra's vital signs. "That's always the question we face," she said without looking up. "But having seen what she's fighting to overcome, I believe this little one deserves every chance we can give her." As night fell again, Sierra's struggle continued. Her body, freed from the physical presence of the executioners, now battled their invisible aftermath. The care team settled in for another night of vigilance. Knowing that each hour the cubs survived strengthened the fragile hope that she might, against all odds, recover. The turning point came on the third day. Dr. Cortez had just finished her morning examination of Sierra, noting small improvements in the blood work, but still concerned about the cub's unresponsiveness. She was updating the medical chart when a small sound caught her attention. Turning back to the treatment table, she watched in astonishment as Sierra's eyes flickered open. Not the vacant, unfocused gaze of previous days, but a clear, alert look that seemed to take in her surroundings. "Jessica!" Dr. Cortez called to her assistant. "Come quickly!" As if to prove this was no fleeting moment of consciousness, Sierra lifted her head slightly. The movement was weak and trembling, but deliberate. The small bear was fighting back. After days of hovering at the threshold of death, Sierra had made a choice for life. The news spread quickly through the rehabilitation center. Staff members who had worked tirelessly found new energy in this small victory. Sierra's vital signs strengthened hour by hour. By evening, she accepted her first spoonful of a special formula designed for orphaned bear cubs, lapping weekly but with unmistakable hunger. Each day brought new progress. Sierra's fever subsided, and the infection markers in her blood began to trend downward. The wounds left by the removal of hundreds of ticks started to heal, though her fur remained patchy and would take months to fully regrow. Most encouraging was her increasing alertness. The cub watched the movements of her caretakers with growing interest and even responded to their voices. Dr. Cortez documented every milestone, no matter how small. The first time Sierra stood on wobbly legs, the day she consumed a full portion of formula without assistance, the morning she batted playfully at a soft toy placed in her enclosure. Each achievement represented another step away from the brink of death, another victory against the executioners that had nearly claimed her. What touched the staff most deeply was the emergence of Sierra's personality. Despite all she had endured, the abandonment, the parasites, the invasive medical procedures, a distinctive spirit began to shine through. She showed a particular fondness for Jessica, who had maintained that first crucial overnight vigil and would make soft huffing sounds when the technician entered her space. "Bears are incredibly resilient," Dr. Cortez explained to Sam and Lisa during their weekly visit. "But even among bears, this one is special. I've never seen a cub come back from such an extreme condition." The statement acknowledged what everyone involved in Sierra's care had come to believe. They were witnessing something extraordinary, not just a medical recovery, but a testament to the will to live that burns in all wild creatures, a flame that even an army of executioners had failed to extinguish. The weeks that followed witnessed Sierra's remarkable transformation. Her body, once ravaged by parasites and weakened by disease, began to heal at an astonishing rate. The patchy fur that had fallen out due to the tick infestation started to regrow, coming in thick and glossy black. Her once protruding ribs disappeared beneath a healthy layer of fat as her appetite returned with typical bear gusto. Daily weigh-ins became celebrations as the numbers steadily climbed, charting her return to proper cub size and weight. Physical therapy became part of Sierra's daily routine. At first, this consisted of gentle exercises to rebuild her wasted muscles. Jessica would support the cub's weight as she took tentative steps around a small, protected exercise yard. Progress was measured in additional feet walked each day, in stronger steps, in longer periods of activity before fatigue set in. By the 6-week mark, Sierra was able to climb the low platforms in her enclosure, her movements becoming increasingly confident and bear-like. Even more remarkable than her physical recovery was Sierra's emotional transformation. Bears are naturally wary creatures, especially those who have known suffering at such a young age. Yet Sierra developed a level of trust in her human caretakers that surprised even the most experienced staff members. She seemed to understand on some instinctive level that these humans had saved her from the executioners that had nearly claimed her life. Dr. Cortez observed this unprecedented trust with scientific curiosity and personal wonder. She recognizes that we helped her, she noted in her research journal. There's a cognitive leap here that goes beyond simple conditioning or association. The bond between Sierra and Jessica grew particularly strong. The technician who had watched over the cub during those first critical hours became a source of comfort and security. Sierra would seek out Jessica's presence during examinations, visibly relaxing when she caught the familiar scent. When frightened by new procedures or unfamiliar staff, the cub would call out with distinctive vocalizations that quieted only when Jessica appeared. As Sierra's health improved, her enclosure was gradually expanded to include more natural elements: logs to climb, pools to splash in, hidden food items to discover. These enrichment activities served the dual purpose of preparing her for a potential return to the wild while providing essential mental stimulation. The staff watched with delight as Sierra's natural bear behaviors emerged. She showed particular enjoyment in water, spending hours batting at floating objects and practicing her swimming skills. The rehabilitation center had strict protocols about minimizing human imprinting on wildlife destined for release. Yet Sierra's case presented unique challenges. The intensive care she had required had unavoidably created attachments. The team now faced the delicate balance of maintaining the trust that had been instrumental in her recovery, while gradually encouraging the independence she would need for survival in the wild. What no one had anticipated was how Sierra herself would navigate this transition. As her strength returned, so did her wild instincts. The cub began to show increasing interest in the scents and sounds from the natural world beyond her enclosure, suggesting that despite her profound connection with her human saviors, the call of her true nature remained strong. 8 months after her rescue, Sierra stood at the edge of a vast wildlife preserve, worlds away from the dying cub that had been found beneath a juniper tree. Her coat shone glossy black in the morning sunlight, her body strong and healthy. The scars from her ordeal remained visible only to those who knew where to look. Small patches where the fur grew slightly differently, a notch in her left ear where the infestation had been particularly severe. The decision to release Sierra back into the wild had not been made lightly. For weeks, the team had carefully assessed her readiness, gradually reducing human contact and monitoring her ability to forage, climb, and display proper bear behaviors. Sierra had passed every test with flying colors, her wild nature reasserting itself with each passing day. Dr. Cortez, Sam, Lisa, and Jessica gathered for the momentous occasion. Their eyes glistened with tears that none attempted to hide. This small bear had touched them all profoundly, changing not just their professional perspectives, but their personal understanding of resilience and courage. The transport crate door was opened. Sierra hesitated only briefly before stepping out into her new beginning. She paused to sniff the air, taking in the rich scents of the wilderness. Then, without a backward glance, she loped confidently toward the tree line and disappeared into the forest that was her birthright. The team stood in silence, watching the spot where Sierra had vanished. It was Jessica who finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. She made it. Against everything, she made it. These simple words captured what had seemed impossible months before. A bear abandoned to certain death at the hands of merciless executioners had not only survived but thrived. Sierra's journey from victim to victor represented hope in its purest form, a testament to what becomes possible when compassion meets determination. As Sierra begins her new life in the wild, her story continues to inspire all who hear it. From the brink of death to freedom, her journey reminds us of nature's resilience and the profound difference that human intervention can make when guided by respect and care for all living creatures. If you found Sierra's incredible journey from abandonment to freedom as moving as we did, please consider subscribing to our channel. Every day we bring you powerful stories of wildlife rescue and rehabilitation from around the world. By subscribing, you help support our mission to document and share these remarkable tales of survival, resilience, and hope. Join our community today and never miss another heartwarming story of triumph against the odds.